On the morning of August 24th, in the year 79 AD, the people of Pompeii woke up. They made breakfast. They kissed their children. They went to work. It was a normal day, a beautiful day. They did not know that by evening, their city would be gone forever. This is not a story about death. This is a story about life, the life of a city that the world forgot for 1700 years. This is the last day of Pompeii. Welcome to Echoes of History, the place where you learn English through history's greatest true stories. Every story is told slowly and clearly just for you. So sit back, relax, and let history teach you English. Now, let us begin. To understand this story, we need to understand Pompeii. Pompeii was not a small village. It was a busy, beautiful city. It sat on the coast of southern Italy, near the blue waters of the Bay of Naples. 20,000 people lived there. They had everything a great city needed: wide stone streets, tall buildings, busy markets, beautiful temples, public baths where people relaxed and talked, theaters where people watched plays and music. The people of Pompeii were merchants and farmers, bakers and artists, doctors and teachers, mothers and children. They loved food. Researchers found more than 80 restaurants in Pompeii. 80! In a city of 20,000 people. They loved sport. Their stadium could hold 20,000 people, the entire city. They loved beauty. Almost every home had paintings on the walls, gardens with fountains, floors of colored stone. Pompeii was alive, loud, beautiful, full of ordinary people living ordinary lives. Behind the city stood a mountain, Mount Vesuvius. It was tall and green and beautiful. Farmers grew grapes and vegetables on its slopes. The soil there was rich and dark, the best soil in the region. The people of Pompeii loved their mountain. They painted it in their homes. They wrote about it in their letters. They did not know what it truly was. They had no word for volcano. They had never heard of such a thing. To them, Vesuvius was simply a beautiful mountain, permanent, safe, forever. But deep beneath the mountain, something had been building for centuries, slowly, silently, waiting. August 24th, 79 AD. The sun rose over Pompeii as it always did, warm and golden. The bakers lit their ovens before sunrise. The smell of fresh bread filled the streets. Merchants opened their shops. Farmers brought vegetables to the market. Children ran through the stone streets. Dogs slept in the shade. A young woman named Rectina sat at her window and wrote a letter to a friend. She wrote about the weather, about her garden, about dinner that evening. Ordinary words, ordinary life. An old man sat outside his home, watching the street. He had sat in that same spot every morning for 40 years. A baker named Marcus placed fresh loaves on his counter. His hands were white with flour. He was thinking about his daughter's wedding the following month. Nobody was afraid. Why would they be? It was just another beautiful morning in a beautiful city. But not everything was normal. For several days before, the ground had been shaking. Small earthquakes, gentle movements beneath their feet. The people of Pompeii noticed, but they were not worried. The ground shook sometimes. It always stopped. The water in some wells had disappeared. Strange, but not frightening. Some animals were behaving oddly. Dogs refused to eat. Birds went silent. A few people left the city that week. Something felt wrong to them. They could not explain it. They just left. Most people stayed. This was their home. Their life was here. Their family was here. And besides, it was a beautiful morning. You are listening to Echoes of History, where every story helps you learn English naturally. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe. A new history story every single week. Now, let us continue. It was just after midday. A young man named Pliny was visiting his uncle in a town across the bay. He was 17 years old. He loved books and writing. He was reading when he heard his mother call. He looked up. Above Vesuvius, something was rising. A cloud, but not a normal cloud. It was white and gray and enormous, rising straight up into the sky, then spreading outward at the top, like a great tree or an umbrella. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Pliny wrote about it later. It rose to a great height, then spread out to the sides. Sometimes it was white, sometimes dark and spotted, as if it carried earth and ash within it. Across the bay in Pompeii, people stopped what they were doing. They looked up. They had never seen anything like this. The mountain they loved was alive. First came the ash, small pieces, gray and white, falling gently like snow. People held out their hands and caught it. Strange, interesting, but not yet frightening. Then the pieces grew larger. Small stones began to fall. People went inside their homes. They put pillows on their heads for protection. They waited. The sky above Pompeii turns dark, not the darkness of night, something heavier, something that felt alive. In the streets, people lit candles. They held each other. They waited for it to stop. Parents told their children it would be over soon. They believed it. They had to believe it. Some families gathered their most important things, jewelry, money, small objects they loved. They held them close, and they waited. Across the bay, young Pliny watched and wrote. He wrote everything he saw, every detail, every color of the cloud, every sound. He did not know it then, but his words would be the only record, the only eyes that survived to tell the story. By evening, the ash was very deep. The streets of Pompeii were quiet. The baker Marcus never finished his loaves. They were found 1,700 years later, still on the counter, still in the shape he left them. The old man who sat outside every morning was not outside anymore. The woman writing her letter never finished it. The city that had been so full of life just hours before went quiet, and the mountain covered it gently in a deep gray blanket of ash and silence. For 1,700 years, Pompeii slept beneath the ash. The world forgot it. New cities were built above it. New generations lived and died without knowing it was there. Then, in 1748, workers digging in southern Italy found something, a stone wall, then a street, then a room with paintings still on the walls, bright and beautiful as the day they were made. Pompeii had come back. Today, millions of people walk those same stone streets. They see the same mountains in the distance. They touch the same walls. And sometimes they stop, because in those streets you can almost hear it. The sound of a city that was alive, that laughed and argued and loved on an ordinary summer morning. A city that did not know it was living its last day. None of us ever do.
Thank you for listening to Echoes of History, the place where history teaches you English. I want to ask you something. If you could spend one day in ancient Pompeii, what would you want to see first? Tell me in the comments below. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe to Echoes of History, a new story every week. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning. This is Echoes of History.